Okay, I got a lot of questions on the last one relatively quickly, so I figured I would do the next one because I finished my homework early. Um, so let me know if you have any training, lifestyle, nutrition related questions you would like me to answer in the comments of this one, and I will answer them in the next one. The other thing I wanted to ask is if anyone had any suggestions for other content to put on this YouTube channel. I'm kind of at a loss. I will warn you guys, I don't know how to use a computer. My time is a little limited, and I film everything on my phone. So those are my caveats, but if you guys have any content you would like me to make, put it in the comments below. If you see someone else's comment that you think is a good idea or you would like to see, give it a thumbs up so that way I can see which ones are more popular, which ones are less popular. But getting into it, the first question is, since you wore one of Brian Alsru's shirts in a couple of videos, do you ever try training like he does, all the giants and sets and stuff? No, I haven't, because my largest focus, more so than anything else, though I try to keep myself in good shape, is strength training, and I think that is a little bit of a compromise as far as pure strength progression goes. Not to say there's anything wrong with it, and he is quite strong himself. And I think it is a good two birds, one stone approach for general fitness. So you want to improve your strength and your cardiovascular fitness at the same time because you have limited time. I think it's a very valid approach, but I've always preferred addressing things separately. So when I'm in the gym, I am a fat powerlifter. I sit down between my sets. I take sufficient rest time. And when I'm working on my conditioning, there is no strength aspect. I'm really trying to tax my cardiovascular system. That's just my personal preference, though. Thoughts on doing additional bodybuilding style rep ranges on accessory motions in addition to powerlifting programming? Well, Adam, I coach you, and we do that already. So, yeah, I'm a fan of it. I think, especially as far as upper body work, directed hypertrophy work goes a really long way until you're very, very advanced. Um, Also, could you explain why getting the minimal effective dose in terms of stimulus to build strength is better than getting a higher stimulus? I've heard Sebastian Oreb talk about this being the case, but isn't really clicking for me. I appreciate you doing these during school. Well, okay, you're welcome. So it's not the minimum effective dose to drive any progress, it's the minimum amount of work to drive the desired rate of progress. Uh, right? Because anything more than that, hypothetically, you might just be jacking up your injury risk or just doing more for minimal returns. It kind of is a contrast with the maximum recoverable volume side of the approach, which I tend to think of more. I think of that more for hypertrophy work. Because I really do subscribe to the minimum effective stimulus approach for strength training. And also, it kind of gets into this discrepancy between maximum recoverable volume and maximum adaptive volume. This idea that there's a certain number of additional sets you can do and could recover from that you're not seeing any additional benefit from. And I think in terms of strength training, there's a bigger gap between maximum adaptive volume and maximum recoverable volume. So pushing up to that maximum recoverable volume as far as like strength parameters go, so we're talking like 6 reps and below, let's just say, there is a certain number of sets that you can be tacking on there that aren't driving any additional progress, might be jacking up your injury risk, might be ingraining poor technique because you're fatigued and you're not seeing much, if any, additional benefit from it. This is purely speculative, it's my opinion, but this is why I'll push the number of sets being performed in a hypertrophy phase when we are chasing that more like maximum recoverable volume metric. But in a strength phase, it's about doing the amount that needs to be done to drive progress. Oftentimes, that's still quite a bit of work, but that's generally how I think about it. Have you dealt with any severe, painful injuries from powerlifting? What were they, and what did you learn from them? Well, so as far as severe, I don't think anything's severe if you don't have to get surgery for it. So I haven't had anything severe, but I've had a lot of painful ones. Can't say I learned a lot from most of them. I just learned how to better train around rather than through. I've always thought that one of the most important things you can really internalize is if I hurt my knee, yeah, sure, I'm going to dial back my squats and follow rehabilitation, but I'm going to make extra progress on my bench because I have that much more mental and physical resources to commit to it. So you're going to get even better at the things you are still able to do, because I think a lot of people get mentally burned out when they get hurt and they back off everything. They're like, oh, I'm hurt, this sucks. You know, like that's what I tell everybody. I'm like, look, if you hurt your knee, you're coming out of this with a big bench PR. You know, and focus on the things that you can do and getting really good at those. But as far as painful injuries, I hit the catch on one side on a squat that I was doing beltless, and I strained my QL really bad, and I could barely walk, but I still managed to like hobble to the gym and like Larson press the next day. I haven't really missed a day of training in, I don't know, 5 years. Even when I probably shouldn't train when I'm sick or hurt, it's just what I do. I just show up and do my best. You know, and it's probably worse than had I rested, but it's just kind of the approach I've always liked. I failed a squat and I punched the weights and I broke my hand. That one was cool. Other than that, I had like a high-grade muscle strain in my adductor, had a little bit of bruising. That was a while ago. What I learned from that was just make sure I do my Cossack squats and my Copenhagen's planks at some point in the week. But most of them are just kind of one-off stuff. Because I believe, I have confidence that I'm reasonable enough in my programming that usually when I have an injury, it wasn't a programming related thing, and I do a good enough job monitoring my hydration status and my nutrition leading into training that usually those aren't the causes. So when I do get hurt, usually it was just something dumb that I was doing that wasn't like a systemic thing. Really solid video, Samuel. Why, thank you. Wow. Tips on how to get a beard like yours. Don't shave. It works. If you're young, you know, keep your hopes alive. I couldn't grow a beard until I was like 21, so cross your fingers. It's really helpful for when you get fat, you can hide your double chin. Should I hit a heavy singles on a deload week? No. That would not be a very effective way to deload. Also, what should I do after a deload week? Slowly ease into where my percentages were, go right back at it. Okay, that depends if it's a deliberate, like, planned deload or if it's a reactive deload. So if you're in a program that doesn't really call for a deload every X amount of time and you just realize that you accidentally overreached, you're taking a deload to kind of decay some of that over-accumulated fatigue, then I would resume right where you left off. If you're following like an intentional, like a functional overreaching program, kind of like how Juggernaut or Josh Bryant do it, where you have 3 weeks and you ramp up aggressively across the 3 weeks, and then you deload, and on the 3rd week you're actually going past your maximum recoverable volume, and then you're deloading right after to hope you get some sort of like super compensation, like rubber banding effect. If that's the case, if you're trying to do something like that, then I would definitely scale back for the first of 3 weeks so you have room to ramp into your next functional overreaching period. Say I eat at daily maintenance. If I happen to eat a decently big surplus on one day, can it help my performance the day after? It's a really, really good question. So I'm going to call this carb loading. It's not, because carb loading in the traditional sense doesn't really benefit us within true strength training, because you're basically, what you're doing when you carb load is you're hypersaturating your intramuscular glycogen stores. But we don't really use up all of our glycogen during strength training anyway, and that's not the limiting factor to how much weight you can lift. So in that regard, we don't really benefit from it. But the reason I think that you're so much stronger after you eat a lot the day prior or the morning of, I think it has more to do with the additional water retention that comes with all those carbohydrates being intaken. Intramuscular additional water retention, I seem to believe it increases your strength output. I think it's important that you mention that you're at maintenance, because anyone who's done even a remotely steep deficit with somewhat limited carbs will know that if you have a refeed, that this effect is very dramatic. Your performance will be greatly improved the next day. Your muscles will feel like you filled them up. It's very nice. But when you're not in a deficit, you're not in that starved for carbohydrate state, the effect is a lot less dramatic, but still there. So I'll carb up into like a heavy bench day or a heavy squat day. And I do feel it makes a difference, even though I'm eating at maintenance or even in a surplus. So that would be like, just the difference between a it's not a refeed because you're not cutting, but like a high carb day prior to training, even outside of a deficit, I think it has its place. What do you think about someone who cuts weight, as I've done, 20 pounds, and then they maintain that weight till it becomes natural for strength? Just wondering, because I'm not too far from as strong as I was when I was eating 3,700 calories. Well, it sounded like it worked well for you. I don't really have any thoughts on it. It sounds like it worked out well for you. It's pretty case by case. What would you recommend to go from a 315 to a 405 bench? Preferably something that can fit into a push-pull leg split. Exact rep ranges and percentages would be nice. I've basically gym broed my way to 315 over 2.5 years. Well, it sounds like you want me to write you a program, which I'm not going to do because it's kind of my job and that's kind of how I pay rent. But if you gym broed your way, just about anything would be better, probably like anything structured. So look around at some free programs and find the one that you think makes the most sense and you can fit it into your desired split. Give it a go once or twice verbatim, and then you can start fiddling with the accessories and the volume and whatnot. But I'm not writing your program. If I have a top set of 4 at RPE 8 on deadlift and I get to the 3rd rep and it already feels like an 8, should I stop the set on the 3rd rep or continue the set and overshoot the RPE? What are the pros and cons in the situation if I continue the set or overshoot? Or I stop at the 3rd rep and stay at the prescribed RPE? That is a phenomenal question. 10 out of 10 question. So which one you should do is going to be very dependent on where you're at in your program structure. So you need to understand your program structure and kind of know what the goal is, right? So the pros and cons are just going to come down to the fatigue that's associated, right? So if you do the 4th rep, you're going to be presenting your body with a greater stimulus, but you're also going to be accumulating more fatigue than your program or your coach or you are looking for if you put it at 8. Right, so if you're in a strength phase or an accumulation phase where accumulating fatigue and relevant rep ranges is the goal, and you have a deload coming soon, or you're going to have to be put on the spot to perform relatively soon after, so if you don't have a big session coming up in 2 days, then I think it would be appropriate to do the final rep. If you're in more of a strength or a peaking, if you're outside your strength into a peaking phase and not overreaching your fatigue is something that's important to you, or you're going to have to perform big again in the next couple of days, then stopping early would be the move. That's why oftentimes I will program a RPE based AMRAP, so as many reps as you can do before you hit an 8 and then you stop at 8. I think it reduces the instance of overshooting, and because the exact rep range isn't as important from a stimulus standpoint as the relative intensity and like the load is. The difference between a set of 5 and a set of 6 stimulus wise isn't all that big. But I think that's a great question. I hope that kind of helps. Is like it's super dependent on where you are at within a program, and that's where understanding your program is very helpful. Is lower back soreness after a heavy deadlift session a thing? Yeah, it's definitely a thing. Your spinal erectors play a big role in the deadlift. They get sore like any other muscle does. You will find that as you get more technically proficient at deadlifting because of better starting position, better bracing, stronger glutes, and better utilization of your lats to reinforce your back position so you're not making your spinal erectors do all the work, alongside bracing, will decrease the demands on them. So you'll be able to reach more sets within a close proximity of failure without them getting as thrashed as when you're really just pulling using your spinal erectors. But yeah, it is very much a thing. He mentioned that he did a bunch of volume on the way up to a set, and he felt like his spinal erectors were fried. This is where deadlift is a little bit unique, where you really do have to conserve some energy. You want to do enough work on the way up that your CNS is firing, whatever that may mean scientifically. You want to do enough work on the way up that your technique is good. You want to do enough work that your core body temperature is up and relevant musculature has blood flow to reduce injury risk, and you don't want to do so much that you're tired out and your performance is hurt. For bench, that looks like a reasonable amount of reps to really make sure you have blood in your pecs, blood in your shoulders, whatnot. Deadlift, it's going to look a lot more limited, so dialing back the number of reps on those sets on the way up you're doing, or making the jumps bigger to save a little bit of energy, is something that's often necessary, especially with a conventional deadlift. How do you tell if lower back tightness or soreness or lower back pain can be injury threatening. The honest answer is that is something you have to learn by towing the line, slightly tweaking something, dialing it back, knowing that, I can get through this if I just brace well. Honestly, it's a trial by fire. If I figure out a super cool system, I think it still won't work because someone who isn't experienced in training just won't know the feelings I'm referring to. And there's no tests to know that kind of thing because injury risk is something that's very hard to study or predict. So more so than anything else, it's something that comes with training experience. I hope that helps. Thank you guys for the questions. Please ask me more. I enjoy doing these.